had leftovers downstairs
Appointments.
in the office.
A lot of.
But we're
Somebody
gonna keep them in the office. Like I got one in mine. He has one in hers. We have two in the state. We're gonna put another one up in the state.
If you get new ones, what color do you
Oh.
Well,
Well,
I think color.
At four council meeting to decide.
I think burgundy.
yes.
Red, yellow, blue.
Well,
Burgundy.
Well,
Multicolor.
I don't think we're getting invented. I think we're going chairs.
we wanted to do chairs. Chairs is the best.
I like
Well,
chairs.
you heard about what happened with the great story of the court council and choosing the new colors of the furniture, right? So the very famous story, court council gets together and they're deciding they're gonna pick a new color, right? And so the court sergeant major gets up first. The court sergeant major says, we need blue. The colors of the chair need blue. Blue represents the spirit. We want the spirit to move through this place, and that is what the colors
Blue.
need. And so then the corps officer got up, and the corps officer said, no. Red, the blood of Christ. What redeems us? The thing that washes over.
I see the red.
And so the whole thing back and forth, and then suddenly the whole chapel started to shake. It was a shake that they couldn't believe. They thought they'd have an earthquake, but then all of a sudden they heard angelic voices, and the roof itself parted in an unbelievable way, and Christ himself lowered down and said, "Thus saith I, the
Yellow.
colors of the benches will be red." And the Christ then ascended up with the angelic chorus, singing the whole way. The roof rejoined together, and everybody sat around amazed. And the corps officer said, "We still voted blue." Corps sergeant major, I messed it up. See, that's the old Salvation Army joke. And actually, it's funny because in my
I was
skit.
going to say, what core was that?
Yeah. My skit for drama for the concert next week or this weekend, I have the prep kids, so I have the younger kids, and I wrote the script, and it's a babysitter coming to babysit kids, and pizza goes missing, and spoiler alert, turns out it was the dog. But the mom and dad are heading to the core council meeting to vote on the color of the carpet, and I put in a line like that, and the dad's line is, "They will not be changing the color from red. Red, the blood of Christ. And as long as we're here, we're going to be walking on bloody carpet for the rest of our days."
Oh, and then your office.
I was like, that's the joke for the dad in the script.
Wow.
That's the other thing that desperately would love is carpet. New carpet in here would be wonderful.
This
Well-
isn't that old, is it?
Actually, yeah.
Captain,
yeah.
we are streaming, so everybody's.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
So if anybody that's watching the stream would like to donate towards the Chapel Chair Fund, we're more than welcome to take that.
We asked for $1 million.
No, we are going to be asking the community.
The thing is, I think once they do that, there should be no food and drinks in the chapel.
Well, I'd even
No
like to
matter
get
how
rid of.
old or young they are.
I'd really like to get rid of the carpet. That's go
The floor?
do flooring. Do like linoleum, something that's easier to eat. But that's another story. But that ain't anywhere. Money
I
wise,
think if
anything.
you just had the floor, it would echo.
Yeah, you need something. That's true.
What do you want, carpet? I like carpet.
Oh, that's right. It's my fault. I'm the one. complaining.
Just put wood.
I think your
floor in
carpet
with
is
the
wrong
runners.
all the time.
Hi, Captain Jen.
Hi.
Oh, you're not.
It sounds like it's been a day for a lot of people. It's been crazy and busy for people.
Nuts.
Jake, thanks for coming out, even though you were already ready for bed. Thanks for coming to Bible study.
For bed already?
He got home from school and put on his pajamas.
I can't blame him. He's excited he didn't have football
You
practice
go,
tonight.
Laura, you go.
So I do have, the video is going, I'll be stapling our papers, but I do have papers actually done properly from last week to fix last week's, this week's, and next week's. Even though we're not meeting next week.
Oh, we're not?
So I'm sorry. Captain and I have to go away for our refreshers because it's almost 10 years. We've been officers almost 10 years.
You get to spend a whole week with so many lovely people. I cannot wait to go through this. Sorry.
You look like you're really excited.
I am.
Thursday, you get to go to your favorite place for lunch. Okay.
Chuck E. Cheese?
Chuck E. Cheese.
At pizza, baby.
So I'm not sure what time Catherine and I will be getting home on Thursday, so we won't have Bible study.
Holy.
If the Home League wants to meet, we can talk about that after Bible study. But we are now on chapter 11, from shepherd to king. We're going to find out where Saul dips out of the story and where David comes in. And then we're going to be talking about David for a couple of weeks. So y'all don't want to listen to me talk all the time. So
I was kind of in that middle end. Most guys would have been 3 goldfish. I was 15.
I was just about to say, how many cows did my dad get for me?
I looked at him and I said, my future wife is no heifer, so I don't need one.
You're gonna be on the couch for a month.
I just gave a compliment.
Oh.
No, but I am a hog.
Well, she-
Our
Grace.
lives is Harold's of Grace.
I like that.
We were not allowed to call ourselves that in training school because it was deemed inappropriate.
And then they told us that we had to go to Chub Club and tell her and get told that we were fat. So
Chub Club.
You're kidding.
no, they had a fat club.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh. Yeah.
2 more.
The whole packet
That
goes
should be
together. There's three. There's three.
The whole packet goes together.
Oh, I got one.
Give it to her.
You should have 11 and 12.
There should be,
Oh.
it goes 11, 12, 10.
I got 11 and 12.
11, 12.
Oh, wait, I got 10.
Oh, yeah.
10's in the back.
11, 12.
Got it.
Oh.
No, 10, 11, 12.
Well, aren't you glad that we're not in a day and age where you have to pay cattle or livestock to get married? Because
Hello. If somebody offers me 10 cows for a lily, I'm gonna take it.
Where are you gonna put them?
I probably
We'll find
they're
the
gonna go
freezer.
get processed and in the freezer.
Storage unit, put on the
Although these days you want to offer me chickens,
And the eggs.
chickens,
Oh, yeah.
egg laying chickens, and I'll take those. So- So in your reading of the material or in the video, was there anything that stood out to you or any questions you had?
Going back to sports analogies with David, since I got here, because one thing that the Lord has opened up to me has been the life of David and how I've looked at him a different way. But I just kept thinking of sports, so many sports analogies, like Tom Brady. Like there's every year at draft time they show Tom Brady's draft where he had like a dad bod and he ran as one of the slowest times ever. He was taken 7th round, I think, and 6th round. And I think it was like 12 quarterbacks went before him. And what they didn't take in consideration was like how much he knew about football and how he would execute and do everything. And I thought of Muggsy Bogues, who was a basketball player in the 90s. He was 5'6", and, playing up against 7'2" people. And just all
Rather think about Kurt Warner.
Kurt Warner. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a bagger at it. Hey, listen, we're lazy. We're Bible study, Jerry. But he's another great example because he went from bagging groceries to you're only good enough to play in an
Because he
arena.
wasn't good enough.
You ship him off to Europe, and then he gets to the team,
Wins
and
the
now
Super Bowl.
and he's in the Hall of Fame now. But and David's the same way. And the thing about Psalms or reading the Psalms is that it was his journal, but it bounces around his life. So there's young David, there's middle David, there's King David. So it's hard to know at what point was what. Scholars don't know, but like he's like he's the underdog, rocky story of the Bible.
Well, you would have thought that, so we talked about last time, you had the whiny Israelites, we want a king, everybody else has a king, why can't we have a king? Seriously. Captain, you have missed it, the Israelites whine a lot.
Oh, I know.
Whine,
and fight.
and then they get,
And
and
the
they're like,
church doesn't do that now at all.
No.
and it's always, look at these other,
Get along.
That's right.
look at these other countries, they already have kings and they come take us over, if we had a king, it'd be better. So they look and they find the good-looking guy, who's taller than everybody, and who
Too bad you're
don't
taking
put some
crap.
stuff.
Ah,
And they said,
all the good ones, right?
they said, well, he looks like the best candidate. We're just going to go with him. And then you see how he doesn't listen to God.
Although Saul didn't start off bad.
No,
Saul started well,
he did.
but Saul is a great example of power going to your head.
A
Yeah,
politician.
Exactly. Real corruption corrupts really, and Saul, and even more, the trappings of the paranoia of power. The more power you get, the more you want. Everybody says the money is the root of all evil. It's
It's
not. Power and leverage is the root of all
I thought
evil.
money was.
That's what people like to say, but with money comes power. And people aren't seeking the money, people are seeking the power and the authority over people. And so Saul,
Yeah, but money rules your life.
Saul is getting jealous at David.
Well,
and,
so even before we got
but he
there,
started well.
he did. He was starting well. And then it was time for them to fight somebody, and Samuel wasn't there right when he was supposed to. And he's like, oh no, everybody's going to leave. So I'm just going to go ahead and offer the burnt offering. I'm going to offer the sacrifice. He put himself
He wrote an
in.
executive decision.
He put himself into place and said, I can do what the priest is supposed to do. I'm the king, so I can go ahead and do it. And he's doing it just to see, he's like, you couldn't have waited like 5 more minutes. Like, I was on my way. Oh, well, they were going to leave. So don't worry, I took care of it. It's all good. And then they were against another group, and we're told, wipe everything out. He wipes all the people out, wipes out all the sick stuff, but keeps all the good stuff, all the good livestock, and the king. Why you would want to keep the king, I don't know, because the king's just gonna be mad at you, and then just go get more people. And once again, it's like, what are you doing? God said you were supposed to do this. Oh I was gonna offer it to God, so that's what it was. And so we talked about. You weren't here. We were talking last week about why did God tell them to wipe everything out, and so. I used a really, it kind of worked an example of bird flu. If you got bird flu in one of your birds, you got to wipe them all out or it's going to infect everything. If you've got these people who have all been raised up without God and all this, and they are the enemies of God's people, they're going to keep coming.
There's also a saying in battle, leave no doubt. Don't leave any chance for someone to say that you weren't the powerful one. And that people were questioning God's power and authority. So that God would.
We didn't like that they killed the babies. Innocent little babies.
Everybody, they had killed every pet animal.
But she made sense. You know, that baby's gonna say, hey, and grow up and start an army of their own, and it's gonna
Correct.
turn all over.
Do you know the Hitler paradox? You get a time machine. Can you go back and kill baby Hitler?
No.
Like, and you have to put yourself in that position of, and even for us, maybe even Osama bin Laden, baby in the bassinet, swaddled. Can you chop that head off?
So
No.
he doesn't grow up to,
Correct. Yeah, and so it's this paradox
but like they say,
and leave going up.
there's always somebody else that's gonna take his place.
And let's go back. Let's rewind even further. Is there an uproar? We never have any uproar about Noah, about the flood. Every animal, every child, every family was wiped out in the flood because God had to hit the reset button. And you don't know. And that's the leave no doubt and leave no opportunity. That's what that does too. We know. I think Berwick is a great example because we call it a generational town. You grow up in this place. Most people grow up with the belief of their parents and their grandparents, and Yeah. But even the neighborhood, and you take on the culture and you take on the community and you take on, like, that's who you are. Now, if you take that and you make it evil, you're taking on that. And so, you know, it's what do the kids call it now? Like, oh my God, I just said the kids call it now.
The kid just left the room.
Oh, the kids these days. I am sorry. It's the villain origin story. It's the Joker, you know, getting his family killed, and you know, he goes on to do that or whatever else. So you have to eliminate that seed, because there's going to be, now what you're doing is you're giving the opportunity. I hate God because he killed my family and he killed everyone around me. Now you've got every single child in that area that has that same exact feeling. What are they going to do towards God and his people? Exact revenge. Or not follow. That was last week. What is this week? Sorry. I got to come every week.
So you have all that. You have, this is why God's saying it's time for somebody else. So Samuel goes, and he's taken to Jesse's house, and he sees the first son, and he's the oldest, and he's tall, and he's good looking, and he's like, he's got to be the one. Nope. You have to think. After that was like the first, people's first thought with Saul. And here it is, the little brother.
It's the glass slipper. It is. It's Cinderella's glass slipper, right? It's the stepmother. The prince comes, and the stepmother does what? Here are my 3 beautiful stepdaughters. Right? You know, they should, nowadays the prince would do a jump scare. You know, but these are 3 beautiful stepdaughters, and Cinderella's the one off in the corner. They don't touch even enough on the very fact of, like, I mean, you can almost picture the movie, right? Like, Jesse gets word that his family's been chosen, and it's like, prepare the house, you know, it's like every musical that's ever been written. You know, prepare the children, get your rooms, look your best, get your haircuts, get your, you know, do a couple of curls, get those biceps up. And what's the example that they're going off of? Who's king then? You know, so the examples they have are good-looking, strong men who can lead. So that's obvious, like, what we have to have, because that's all we ever had. And so that's obviously what we have to keep doing. We've always done it that way. That's why we have to do it. We always have done it that way.
We don't like change.
That's right. So David's not even in the discussion.
So what was the Lord trying to show Samuel? That's our first question. Through this process.
That he was trying to remind Samuel, you know, Samuel came and was put in, replaced Eli because Eli's sons weren't doing it. Eli's sons should have been the next priest because they were, you know, the family line. They weren't doing, they may have looked the part, but the inside wasn't the part. So that's what God was trying to point out, was that it's not what's outside, it's what's on the inside.
We don't have a time frame on how long Samuel's been, because the Bible is really bad about giving time frames. But how long was Samuel the king's prophet? How long has he been in that position? Is he now comfortable in that position? Being a prophet in those times, you should never be comfortable, because, as I've preached on a bunch, the only way to gauge if you're a true prophet is it better come true. And if it doesn't come true, automatic death sentence. So literally every decision you make, your life is on the line. But there's got to be, when you're the highest of the high and the biggest one, there's got to be a level of comfort when you're the king's right-hand man. And, all right, let's get this over with, a little nonchalantness. And, you know,
Just be upfront and honest.
yeah.
So in the little timeline that it shows in the book, it's in that same year that David's anointed that we have the story of David and Goliath. And it was interesting, you know, so the brothers go on out, the brothers are out fighting, but well, David, well, you're 16, but I really need you, listen, if everybody else is out fighting, somebody's got to watch the sheep. So he's still there watching the sheep. And his dad tells him, take this ephah of roasted grain, these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They're with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. I always knew that he brought food. I didn't realize that he took cheese along too. That's a good brother, bringing cheese to the front lines for your brothers. So he gets out there, and you know, for 40 days you've had the Philistine, you've had Goliath, you know, challenging them, and nothing's happening. And I like it. If you've ever seen the VeggieTales version of this story, it's little Junior Asparagus goes. And so he gets out, and Saul's like, okay, well, I mean, I guess if you really want to go ahead and try, thinking, this kid is done. He's toast. But, well, and he puts Saul's armor on, and so in VeggieTales, he's so short that he looks like a little bullet. Because like the helmet's so big and everything's so small. And he's like, no, I don't need all this. I've got God on my side. Because at this point, he's been anointed. God has come on him.
He was just a little man.
And he went down and he got the stones. He did exactly how God told him. And Goliath's like, oh, really? You think I'm a dog? You come after me with like some little kid? You're gonna do a sticky me? What are you gonna do to me? Oh, we're shaking in my boots. Because remember, they said he was like the runt. He was like the little guy. He's out there watching sheep.
But he's
Now,
a shepherd.
but that's the thing is, as a shepherd, you've got to fight all the wild animals.
I never understood that.
So, because they don't think about that part.
Yeah,
Everybody just looks at, you're the little guy.
Shepherds have built-in fighting skills. You literally
But he
are
was
fighting
just a-
bears
just
and
a
lions. Like, I would much rather have hand-to-hand combat with another dude my size, or even 2 feet taller than me, than a bear or a lion. Like, I'd much rather, like, yeah, you know, I'll fight Shaq. Like, I don't care. But like a lion, I'm throwing Jake in his mouth and running. Like, so I don't understand why they didn't have more. I just don't get it. Like, I never understood that.
Because you always, if you're watching something, all right, Mr. Wrestling Man.
Rey
if you're
Mysterio
watching-
took out Great Khali. So
Listen,
that's-
I wasn't going to go exactly Great Khali because he's not. I was going to say, but if you see some of those smaller little guys, and they've had that David and Goliath story where it's the small little guy against the big, taller, muscular guy. People usually are going to be rooting for the underdog, figuring it's the little guy, but it's not always the little guy, it's not always the underdog. That's the thing is that, but when you automatically see it, or if you're at school sports and you are watching your kids and then you see like, you know, your kid's the pitcher and you see some little scrawny kid coming up back, they're like, yeah, everything's going to be fine. Or the little guy on the football field. It's like, he's going to get smushed. That's what you think. You don't think always. You think we should know by now. There's been plenty of examples that don't count out the little guy. Right here in the Bible, but like you're looking at sports all throughout where you've had this, but still that's what people are doing. But David trusts God, does what God says. And it says afterwards, Saul was impressed with David's victory over Goliath. During a post-battle interview, Saul asked David about his family and then drafted David into service at the king's court. David and Saul's son Jonathan had an instant rapport. The two young men formed a friendship of love and loyalty, strong as any brothers. But David's popularity did not play well in the final days of Saul's reign. It even ends up going on at some point talking about how, like when Saul couldn't sleep, David would come in and, play music on his harp for him So the little shepherd who, well, he may have been little, but he could, fought off the bear, the lion, the giant. He's a musician too,
Can't stand those people.
but he's,
Do everything.
he's listening to what God's saying. And at this point, the devil's getting, you've got those seeds of doubt, like what's going to happen. And people started saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. That just did not sit right with Saul. And he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm the king, not this little kid. I'm the king. And you had to think that even if Saul had gotten wind that David had been anointed to be the next king, you got to think in his head, he's like, no, my son Jonathan's going to be the king. That's how it goes. It should be my son Jonathan, not this. And now my son, who should be preparing to be king when I am gone, goes and has to become best friends with this guy? What's up with that? And here, one day, while David was playing the lyre, Saul had a spear in his hand and he hurled it, saying to himself, I'll pin David to the wall. But David eluded him. And he kept trying to figure out, how am I going to he kept setting David up to fail and set David up to get killed, but it wasn't working. Saul was struggling to make sense of the mess he was in and becoming more paranoid and unstable as the days progressed. Many of Saul's subjects, as well as members of his own family, including Jonathan and Saul's daughter Michal, seemed to prefer the young shepherd warrior over the unreasonable king. Consumed by anger and jealousy, on numerous occasions Saul tried to kill David, whom he perceived as his greatest internal threat. Finally, David, in fear for his life, fled from Saul, but Saul was driven to hunt down David. He even ordered the slaughter of 85 priests who had given David shelter. About 600 loyal men gathered around David, a militia too small to challenge Israel's army, but large enough to provide an offensive force. Inside Saul's palace, Jonathan became a double agent. While Saul groomed Jonathan for kingship, Jonathan passed information to David. Jonathan recognized that David would be Israel's next leader. But this prospect seemed increasingly unlikely as Saul's army approached. David's battalion in the desert of En-Gedi. In danger, David did what he always did. He poured out his fears to God and prayed for help. And that's where he started saying, God, deliver me. Deliver me from my enemies. They're waiting against me. I haven't done anything wrong, but they're waiting to attack me. You, Lord God Almighty, you who are the God of Israel, rouse yourself to punish all the naked nations. Show no mercy to wicked traitors. You are my strength. I watch for you. You, God, are my fortress, my God on whom I can rely. But I will sing of your strength. In the morning I will sing of your love, for you are my fortress, my refuge in times of trouble. You are my strength. I sing praise to you.
He's not asking, by the way, God to do all that. He's recognizing God's ability to do that. He's recognizing his sovereignty and power, everything.
And it got to the point where he just, every time Saul kept coming, and David was able to get away. And he was crying out to God, saying, God, you've set me apart for this purpose, but I'm going to get killed before I make it. But God, you are God. And even though it seems like they're all coming after me, I know that you're stronger than them. And he kept running. He got to one point where Saul's coming after him. And it says that there was a cave. Saul went in to use the bathroom. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, this is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He's doing his business. And he just cut off part of his robe. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. With these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul, and Saul left the cave and went away. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, my Lord the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of robe that I cut off in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but I didn't kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me. May the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you."
14 years.
14 years he was coming after her.
It's very much like a movie. It's such like a movie. You just picture him sneaking up and like leaving the weapon behind and everything. But it also, there's a level too. People skip over, like we go to David recognizing God and recognizing God's plan in his life, but there's still a recognition of God's plan in Saul's life by David. And even though Saul himself doesn't have that same recognition of God's plan in his life. And I equate that today to, when we see people and, people, let's say, left the church, and we may have seen leadership qualities or a walk in there with them, and they don't see that anymore. They've taken a complete other way. We still see it, and we still want to let them know that, and we find a way to do that. And David's way of reminding Saul that God spared him, God brought him there, God anointed. David still respected the authority of God towards Saul, even though Saul was not respecting the authority of God towards himself. If that makes sense. Other people, we as Christians, can look at someone who has started living a sinful life, who has fallen away, and still say to them, God's got something for you, and I'm going to respect God's plan in your life. I'm going to try to harness that. And it's not out of respect or anything for that person, it's out of respect for God and what he has set aside. And people don't focus on that part too much, that because he's anointed. David's anointed. One of the biggest, here's a great example. The army is hemorrhaging officers. Like, officers are leaving. They're trying to underscore it, but the reality is, like, I think the numbers are up. And
It's not just him, it's the church in
the
general.
church in general.
It's
the
just
losing pastors.
losing pastors.
But if you talk to, most officers that leave, we'll say specifically in the Army, when they leave, they immediately go and you'll see them start drinking, you'll see them start doing the worldly things that we said when we made a covenant. A lot of it comes out of church hurt or whatever it may be. But one of the biggest things that they say when you talk to ex-officers is how suddenly all current officers, people that are still officers, divorce themselves. They just leave them. No longer friends with them, no longer associate with them. And it's like, just because they may have left officership doesn't mean God's still not going to be using them in his plan and ministry, and doesn't mean you're not a part of that.
You can't be friends with them.
Right. Well, yeah. That's every church they did that, and there's some churches. Thankfully, the Army, to my knowledge, has not said this, but have told. We know of pastors that have been told, do not associate with X by
I don't see why not.
their higher ups, to not.
Should be still friends no matter what.
Yeah, it's
not,
it happens when you put broken people in a godly mission. Sometimes
It's like
you
a
get
broken
things.
mission, broken.
But that's there should still be a respect of God's anointing in their life. That
Mhm.
you've still been called, and I don't care if you leave officership or not. You've still been called at one point to be in ministry. In
To be in
ministry,
ministry.
that's a specific calling, and I should be able to be there as an encouragement and as a support and everything else.
You should still be encouragement
Yeah.
at the right position no matter what.
David is doing that to Saul. He's saying, "Listen, you've been the one that you turned your back on me. I didn't do nothing. I didn't treat you."
But he
right.
was there for him always, no matter
Yeah,
what.
but he said, "Yeah, I'm still respecting what God
Right.
has for you."
That should be for every church.
So after that, you think that should be it. You know, Jesus, Saul's like, okay, they called a truce. Didn't last very long. He's going after him again. David finally retreated with his band of loyalists to Philistine territory, which is kind of ironic because that's who he beat that started all this. Jealousy. He's Israel's king to be. He goes in with people who keep waging war against his nation and who eventually took the life of his closest friend Jonathan. The Philistines were in hot pursuit of Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malik Yeshua.
It's the TV.
Oh, it's the TV, I
On
thought
its,
somebody
on,
else.
on its own, it keeps like.
It
When
all
it's on mute-
When I heard the music, I thought it was.
Yeah, we'll put it on mute, and then all of a sudden it'll take itself off mute.
It just wants to be heard, wants to make sure. So finally, his sons are dead. Everyone's surrounding him. Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me. Kill me before they have a chance to get me." But his armor bearer was terrified and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him. And
Oh, that's
it's
that's an easy you just prop it up with rocks and then fall behind.
and it's one of those things like you hear and that's the thing is you hear you can hear that like in old battles and stuff how people will sacrifice themselves and fell on their sword rather than being taken captive.
And that happened right up through the world wars. In Korea.
So how did Jonathan die?
The Philistines killed him
In the beginning or the end?
right before Saul killed himself.
Suicide. Son of
So
suicide.
his sons were killed, and he said, "I'd rather
So
this person who's supposed to protect me kill me, or I'll kill myself than be." So Jonathan's in the Bible. Jonathan was Saul's son and was David's best friend.
Oh.
Later on in the story, we'll hear a little more about how that friendship continued, like even after how David acknowledged that friendship later on. So they all saw that the Israelite army had fled, that Saul and his sons died. They abandoned their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them and sent messengers to let everybody know that they were dead. They made sure his armor and his body were where everybody could see it, and his head was somewhere else. So David grieved deeply, not only over Jonathan's death, but also over Saul's. This had been God's anointed king first, whether he liked him or not.
And a father figure.
And a father figure. If you think that David, if he's anointed at 16, comes in, all of a sudden is in service for the king. It's his best friend died, but his best friend's dad died too. Even though they may have had some issues, this is still somebody who's important in his life.
We'll get Timothy Chalamet to play him.
But eventually, it wasn't even right then that he became the king. There was still another 7-year struggle between David and those loyal to Saul's son, Ishbosheth, that David was made king over all Israel.
Which goes back to Saul, because it's, and while we are experiencing this in our own lives, you have to be careful on who you listen to in power. And because there's blind loyalty. And blind loyalty can lead to dissension. And so there was all these people that were blindly loyal to Saul. And because Saul, for years, gave the rhetoric that David was not worthy to be king, Jonathan was worthy to be king. So Jonathan's out of the equation. What are they going to do? They're going to go to the next son and say, well, remember what Saul said, Saul, and those people will never leave that thought process. And that's where the dissension comes from. And it's not just a small, it's a big dissension it's a war for 7 years in a country, all because, there was this false narrative from Saul that came out of jealousy from David. So you have to be careful on what you listen to, because if you're not, then you can be swayed and be a disruptor to God's plan. God anointed David to take over after Saul. For 7 years, the nation prevented God's plan from happening. God ultimately won, because God always wins, but the people kept that from happening. And the ironic part is that Saul himself had this kind of resolution with David, but the people held on to the rhetoric that had happened before. And even though Saul had this resolution, they didn't want to accept it because they had heard this for 14 years.
And that's even that even gets to about halfway through the chapter. That's about how much he covered in the video, but then there's so much more after that. David is finally made king. He has these different victories over the Philistines. He defeated the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem, making it Israel's national and spiritual capital. He wasn't just concerned with military success, but loved God deeply too, wanted his nation to love God. So he had the Ark of the Covenant. It wasn't in the temple, had it brought in. And it talks about how it comes, he's dancing. He's well, in this case, he's just wearing a linen ephod,
Yeah, he took his clothes off.
He's kind of wearing his underwear. He's out there dancing. He is excited because God's presence, which that is what was said was in the Ark of the Covenant, that signified his presence, was coming back to where it began. And many people got excited about it. But his wife, who was Saul's daughter, Michal, remember her? She wasn't really happy that he's out there dancing around half naked. When he came in and she saw him dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. And they brought it in, the tent, brought the ark in, and they offered their sacrifices and, celebrated all this. And he returned to bless his household. And she said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would. You dance around, make a fool out of yourself. Seriously, you're supposed to be the king. You look like an idiot.
The king without his clothes? What is that called? The king went.
The emperor's new clothes.
Emperor's new clothes.
David said to her, it was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor.
And everyone out in the room went, ooh.
And at that
That was
place,
a mic drop moment. That was a woman shut it.
and I remember a worship song. I will dance, I will sing to be mad for my king. This fashion him, I become even more undignified than this. I will say, and just talking about dancing before the Lord. And after that, she didn't have
Tony.
she never had kids. It is Tony.
It's Tony. That's all. Every time I see Tony dance, I picture David. I have since we got here. He doesn't care. That's him and God, and that's all that's in here at that moment. And that's beautiful.
And he comes in throughout the week.
Yeah.
Just this is his safe place, and he will put on music and just dances and worships God. And
Surprises the Holy Spirit.
Praise the Lord.
that's what he did. That's what David did.
That's all that matters.
And you know, Nathan is brought in as the prophet, and then we're going to get to see what happens. You can read and see how everything sounds really good. David was not a perfect man. One day, with his generals gone to war, the king was confronted by an internal foe as intense as any enemy he faced on the battlefield. So in 3 weeks, we'll start off with that.
He was not a perfect man.
The same way that we saw Saul was listening at the beginning and doing stuff and got distracted. David is doing good and then gets distracted.
We'll have to think if you're allowed back.
Ah!
I know where we're going in this story.
That's the VeggieTales version is King George and the Ducky. But on that note,
So,
let's just pray. I mean, I think that one of the important things to think about is just that
so we didn't name
to remember that God's not, don't judge a book by its cover, is what God was saying,
Don't put yourself or anybody else in a box.
Yeah, you don't know what, you get to know people, see how God sees. There was an Amy Grant song saying, I just want to have my Father's eyes where I see people the way that God sees them. And trust God. If God says that He's got something for you and He's anointed you for something, it's not necessarily going to be an easy road. It's not going to be rainbows and sunshine. I wish I could say that it would be. There will be trials, but God is on your side. So, Father God, we just thank you for that reminder too. That you look on the inside. Help our insides be pleasing to you. Help who we are as people. Help us to be godly men and women, to be godly children of yours. Living right, trying to stay focused in on you, and when troubles come, not just running from whatever you have for us, God, but running to you and asking for your help. And God, when we do stumble, help us to come back to you. We know that none of us are perfect. We're going to have trip-ups, God. But I pray that you would just continue to be with us and continue to help us along the way. In your name we pray. Amen.
So quick praise report. I was